Welcome to Breaking the Barrier, a Western lifestyle podcast highlighting those breaking barriers both in and out of the arena. I'm your host, Rebel Sjeklocha, and Miss Rodeo Nebraska 2023. This year and in season 3, I will be merging my role as Miss Rodeo Nebraska with the podcast, but the mission remains the same: to tell stories that matter to grow the sport of rodeo. Today's episode highlights a true powerhouse woman in the Western industry. I am so thrilled to be visiting with Caroline Lukens, Rodeo Operations Coordinator for the National Western Stock Show. Welcome, Caroline.
Hi, Rebel. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here and to get to share my story a little bit, and just happy to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to learn more about your story. So to kick things off, where did your interest and passion for rodeo come from? How'd you get started?
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of Denver. I didn't have family that rodeoed, but I had a couple cousins that had horses. One jumped, one did like play day event and drill team kind of stuff. So I definitely had an interest in the equine industry from a really young age, but wasn't introduced to rodeo until a little bit later in life. So when I was about 8, I started riding, was really, am really passionate about it, and was able to get a horse a couple years later. Did 4-H and just some casual kid riding stuff. And as I got a little bit older, I made some friends in 4-H, and one of the girls was on our local high school rodeo team, and she had invited me to join one of their practices. They did like a little weekly barrel and pole practice thing at our local fairgrounds. And so loaded up my little show horse, and we went to this high school rodeo practice. And I quickly learned that my 2-eyed jackbred horse maybe wasn't going to be a winning barrel horse. But I had played around with that through middle school a little bit. And then we ended up having an older girl in our club that was in a roping club in another county, and she had invited me to join her there. And that was really where I got to deep dive into the rodeo industry. At the time, the barrel scene wasn't necessarily my passion, and I really stuck to roping. It helped that I had a horse that was bred for it, and gonna be a little bit more successful in that space. But also it was just a really neat opportunity to learn more about what rodeo had to offer. So anyways, I went to those practices, and I started breakaway roping, and the rope club was a little bit more team roping based. And there was another gal that I grew up with, and she had a bigger, taller, like your stereotypical head horse, and I had this short little horse that knew how to stop. So we decided that she was going to head and I was going to heel, and that was pretty much what led that decision. So we started team roping quite a bit through high school, and at that club I'd met another girl that tied goats, and so she taught me how to tie goats, and that was really my event through high school and college, was the goat tying. I really liked to rope, but I was a little bit more successful in goat tying. And I don't know if it necessarily was that I instantly was in love with tying goats, or it was that I just knew that there was more opportunity in it because there wasn't as much horsepower involved, or what it really was. But I really stuck to the goat tying. And so my sophomore year of high school, I got to start rodeoing, and we went to the high school rodeos. And I mean, I was this suburbs kid on a horse that wasn't really cut out to be at the high school rodeos, making 12-second goat runs and hardly getting out of the box, and just continued and had a lot of perseverance, and just didn't care that I didn't know what I was doing. I just loved that I was doing it. So by the end of high school, I was competing with the rest of them. We made it to the high school final, or the high school state finals, a few times. And then I started going to the CJRA rodeos in Colorado, which in Colorado, their junior rodeos let the high school kids compete at them still. in the timed events. And that was really where I gained my confidence. Ironically enough, the CJRA rodeos were a little bit tougher than our high school rodeos, but they were a little bit more accepting, and I was able to really grow myself there. And so when it came time to go to college, neither of my parents had been to a university. My mom took a couple college classes, but neither of them had degrees. And I was really, really adamant that I was going to go to a university and get my 4-year degree. So I'd looked at a bunch of colleges. I wasn't interested in a 2-year. And so I ended up deciding on the University of Wyoming. And there wasn't any rodeo scholarships for me there, but there was academic scholarships. In high school, I was kind of a closet nerd. And so so I had an academic scholarship. I go to the University of Wyoming. I get to college. I get hooked up with some of the best goat tires in our region, and they really elevated me in the sport. And I ended up picking up a new breakaway horse in college, and I was no superstar, but I loved it. I loved the sport. I loved my rodeo team friends. I loved the school I was at. I loved our region. I just loved every part of it. And so, anyways, in college, I had the opportunity to get an internship with the National Western Stock Show. And I had met Leon Vick, my now boss, when we were at the junior rodeos. And so he had offered me an internship role my sophomore year, and that evolved into some contract work through college. And then when I graduated, I got a job at a bank, and that was short-lived. I ended up leaving that job to come back to the National Western and for another contract year. And this was in 2019. And so I ended up coming back home, worked contract that year for the 2020 show. And that was when COVID hit. And so I thought I was going to come back to Denver, get a job, all was going to be well. And so I ended up unemployed for a little while. And that was how I ultimately ended up working in commodities, was because I took that because I took a job because I needed a job, not necessarily that was my dream. But it was amazing. It worked out so great. There were so many skills that I was able to learn and apply from the rodeo industry and for working at the National Western and in the event space that was transferable to the commodity space. So basically my job at Pilgrims was to oversee the procurement and logistics of grain products into feed mills. Was really content in that space. But then I had gotten a call from Leon about a year into that job that they were going to open up this rodeo operations coordinator position at the National Western. And I instantly knew that it was for me. I would screw the commodity space, get me back to the rodeo industry. So here I am, a couple years in, and I just love every bit of it.
That's incredible. Well, I think the overarching theme of your story, at least so far, is just really keeping your nose to the grindstone and working hard, and great things have come from it. That's incredible. When you were approached with this opportunity, decided to come back to the National Western, were you overwhelmed at all? What did that role look like in its initial stages, and has it evolved since then?
It stayed pretty much the same. I felt really confident coming in because a lot of the functions that I was coming in to do were things that I did on a contract basis prior to starting full time. So I was able to have a good background on what it looked like. I knew how the organization worked. I knew how the rodeo was supposed to look. I knew all the players. I had relationships with most people that I work with now. And of course, that's continuing to grow. But I was really fortunate to have those 4 years prior to being full-time to just be a sponge and to learn everything I possibly could from Leon and from the rest of the production team we have here. And so I continue to grow within my role, but the role itself has been the same since I started.
Absolutely. So break down what your job entails on the day-to-day. Obviously, during stock show, during those 16 days, that might look a little bit differently. But what does it take the other 350 days to pull off your role?
Yeah, absolutely. Communication is the biggest part of my role. My job is to communicate with people. We hire over 70 contractors to help during the National Western for just the rodeo. That's just what's happening inside the arena and behind the scenes. Nothing, that's not ticketing, that's just the rodeo. So we hire about 70 contractors that come in and help us produce our event. And my job is to make sure everybody knows what they need to do, when they need to do it, handle credentials, get everybody the information they need to do their job the best that they can do. So even this time of year, so we came out of stock show this January and go into a bunch of recap calls and deep dive into what we just did, because 16 days with 29 rodeo performances can be a whirlwind. And so sometimes if you just sit down, you can't remember everything that happened. And so it's really crucial in my role to have that level of communication with all of our contractors and, of course, our internal staff on how they saw it and things that worked for them, things that maybe could be improved. So there's a big section of recap in my year. This part of the year is pretty fun because we get to be creative and see where we want to take the event and brainstorm ideas and throw big picture things out there and fine tune them. And so this time of year is definitely more in that brainstorming, collaborative, internal side of things. And then we get into our summer. We put on some private rodeos throughout the year, so that keeps me pretty busy. But summertime's busy. We're contracting our contractors to come in. We're handling logistics. We're making sure everything's set with the city to get into the Coliseum. We're starting to get our framework. We do Colorado versus the World, which is an invitational. We take the winners from top rodeos around Colorado and then top contestants from rodeos like around the world. So Calgary, Houston, etc. So starting to get all of that lined out. So summer's really busy, and it's just a sprint into the fall and into January to actually produce the event.
Absolutely. So 29 rodeos in 16 days. First of all, wow. Second, during the rodeo performance, what does your role look like? You know, you're the woman in charge calling the shots with the headset on. What is that experience like?
Yeah. So I don't call our show though. I do run the arena floor, with the help of some of our production team. We bring in Tommy Joe Lucia to call the show itself. So he's up by our announcers and he's calling the show. So he's calling the lights and the video board, and he helps be my eyes when I'm not in the arena and those types of things. So my role during the performance itself is to keep the arena floor rolling. So I'm communicating with absolutely everybody on the ground, judges, contestants, back of house. The craziest part of our rodeo is our back of house. It's really tight back there. There's a lot of people coming in and out of only one gate. we don't have access to our rodeo from our timed event end. So every timed event contestant has to come through the same gate that our stagecoach is coming in, our hitch is coming in, our sponsorship flags. So there's a lot of herding cats throughout the back of house there. We have such a strong team that runs the back of house. And so I just help facilitate what they're doing that matches what's going on in the arena. And again, just communication. My job really is to communicate so that everybody else that has a role knows what they need to know and when to do it. And just working with our amazing team. I mean, my job is easy because I have great people surrounding me.
Absolutely. So you are the first woman to be the rodeo operations coordinator at the National Western. There are a couple other major rodeos in the country coordinated by women, but generally speaking, rodeo is a male-dominated field. What is it like working in that space, and what are some takeaways that you have at this point?
Yeah, I guess I don't know any different, so I don't really think much of it.
Yeah.
I think that it's really awesome. I think that being a woman in this industry has its advantages. I think that everybody's been very receptive of it, and I guess I just don't really know that there's much difference other than that I'm the first one. I'm also a lot younger in this space, which has been awesome for myself and my growth. Because I'm around so many people that have been in the industry a lot longer than me. And so I get to learn so much from the best in the business.
Absolutely. So producing one of the largest rodeos in the country is certainly not a small task, and gives you an up-close look at what's going on in rodeo from all perspectives. Contestants, personnel, stock contractors, you name it. What are some things that you've learned from this role or from this up-close perspective that you didn't know prior to beginning?
Yeah, I've learned everything I now know about rough stock. I came into this job and did not know anything about rough stock. Fortunately, Binion and Chase Servey have been an open book, helped me with any question I have. I sat down at lunch with Binion and asked all of the stupid questions I could think of because I didn't know anything. I didn't know I know your basic mark out and some like basic rodeo 101, but that was the extent of it. So learning about subcontractors and what makes a good horse and what contestants are looking for in their horses and formats. And there's so many elements to the rough stock world that I had no idea about. So it's been really fun to jump into those events and understand them more. And I'm obviously still learning a lot about them. And then also rodeo approvals and formats. I've learned a lot being in this role. In the past, before I was full-time, all of that was, of course, just set up before I even got here. So how to write ground rules and the way it affects so many things, your contestants, the committee, the organization. So it's been really neat to deep dive into ground rules and the structure of the rodeo itself from a PRCA standpoint.
Absolutely. The contestant experience is obviously very important, making sure that contestants want to come back year after year. What are some things that you try to keep in mind when providing accommodations for contestants each year?
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and it really depends on the event. So in the rough stock, making sure that we have a good set of horses and bulls for contestants to get on, and making sure those pens are even. Obviously, that's Binion's role, but we definitely help with that. And having ground rules that are favorable for one that align with the PRCA rule book, but also help our contestants and making sure that they're written in a way that works with what's going on in the rodeo space in other areas and also within ourselves. And then like with your timed event contestants, creating an environment that's easy to get in and out of, as well as easy as possible for Denver. But there's just a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely. So the National Western Stock Show is a very historic event, rich in history and tradition. What is the most rewarding part of getting to propel the National Western into the next era, if you will?
Absolutely. I think the most rewarding part is being able to share the Western lifestyle and the rodeo industry with the city of Denver. We have so many guests that come that have never seen a cow in person, and they don't have any understanding of cattle or the ag industry or where their food comes from. And in the rodeo, we're able to provide an entertaining space to spark curiosity for them. And it's so rewarding to be able to share our industry with a demographic that maybe isn't as familiar with it as we are. And so that's definitely the neatest part of it. Every time we walk into the Coliseum, I just get chills thinking of all the history of that arena and the grand drives that have taken place there, and the horse shows and our rodeos, and all of the historic figures that have been in that building. And even outside of the rodeo, Elvis Presley sang in the Denver Coliseum. So there's so much history in that building alone, and getting to be a part of the rodeo and one of the staples of our event is just such an honor.
Absolutely. What are some goals that you have either for yourself in this role or that you'd like to see in the rodeo moving forward?
Yeah. For the industry as a whole, I just really would like to see, and we're continuing to see, us grow fans outside of the Western lifestyle industry specifically. I think there's so much opportunity within the rodeo space to grow in the entertainment and sports realm. I just think that as industry professionals, that it's our responsibility to positively grow the sport and provide wholesome entertainment for our current and prospective fans. And I just think there's a lot of people out there that have the same values as we do and see a lot of value in the Western lifestyle and the Western industry as a whole. And so I just want to continue growing the sport and the industry in a positive way.
So as someone who wasn't necessarily born into a rodeo family, what kind of advice would you give someone maybe in a similar position that would love to get involved?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, I preach this, just do it scared. If you don't take the leap of faith, you're never going to do it. And the rodeo industry can be intimidating, and there's a lot to it. And it sometimes, from an outsider perspective, isn't extremely welcoming, which is an area we have some growth in. But you just have to take the leap and do it. Regardless of how scary it is, if you love it, you can persevere through the scary parts of it. So just putting your nose down and doing it, and doing the hard work and asking questions, and never being afraid to kind of look silly, because nobody's great at something off the get-go. So just have to put in that work and be curious and have a true love for it.
On that note, if you're interested in rodeo, there are people who are willing to help if you're willing to work hard and ask the right questions. But for the people who are already in the industry, maybe competing in rodeos, how would you advise them to best help the people who are wanting to get involved, or at least wanting to learn more?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same story. You just have to continue putting yourself out there and networking and asking those questions and getting experience. I gained so much from being an intern at numerous different places throughout college. I think that there's a lot of value in just being humble in your work and never being too good for doing something, and just putting your nose down and doing it and learning and being a sponge. I took internships in college, anywhere from market research to rodeo production. I tried to keep my background pretty vast and be able to learn a lot of different skills. And I think the biggest thing, especially for somebody, especially in college, that they can do is to get internships and learn from people that are already in the space and get to know people in the rodeo industry. And relationships get you really far in this industry because it's really small. And so the more people you can know and have good relationships with, the better.
I love your piece of advice of do it scared. And I think that's really important as young people to hear, because oftentimes we sell ourselves short because we don't feel like we have enough experience or, whatever the case may be. So I think that's really powerful. Well, as we kind of close out our conversation today, is there anything that you want people to know either about your role, anything that we missed that you'd like to share?
I think we covered a lot of it. I just encourage anybody that's interested in being in the rodeo production space to put yourself out there and work hard and just be willing to take risks, because at the end of the day, if you don't do it, then if you don't put yourself out there to do it, then nobody's going to put you there. So take the leap of faith.
Well, once again, that was Caroline Lukens, Rodeo Operations Coordinator at the National Western Stock Show. Caroline, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you, Rebel. I appreciate it.
Thanks to the Rural Radio Network for the use of their studio in producing this podcast. As a reminder, seasons 1 and 2 of Breaking the Barrier are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Stay tuned for more new content coming soon. Thanks so much for tuning in. Support for Breaking the Barrier in today's episode is brought to you by the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. With 15 stations across the heartland, they are your go-to source for all things rural and agricultural. Whether you're a farmer, rancher, or just love the rural lifestyle, tune into one of the Nebraska Rural Radio Association stations for entertainment, news, and expert insights. Visit ruralradio.com to find a station near you.